The 5 to 7 year mark is where a lot of people start dropping out from engineering. But there's a lot of learning that needs to happen before you kind of get to work in the more exciting projects. And that usually happens in the first 10 years of your career. You're probably not going to put into the most exciting bridge day one. You may work on little things here and there, but I think that takes a lot of time and experience to really being able to do something exciting in that magnitude. So
Welcome to the Level Design Podcast, a podcast for architects and engineers who want to thrive in this industry by creating more freedom, fulfillment, and financial security. Join us in uncovering how to restore value and honor to the unique people who choose to be designers and caretakers of our built world, and why it's essential to the future of our society, our industry, and our planet.
So can you just give us a brief, like how you got here? Like you're a bridge engineer. You're with Jacobs. You have a podcast, courses. Your own, I'll call it thing on the side, even though you'll explain it way better than that. Tell me a little bit about your journey up to where you are now.
how much time do we have? There's a lot that has happened over the years. But just to keep it simple, I was born in Colombia. I went to school in Colombia and then moved here to play tennis. That's how I actually ended up in the US. I ended up in South Dakota State University, studied civil engineering. I've always wanted to be an engineer. My dad is an architect. My mom is an engineer. I always had an inclination of just construction in general. So that's kind of how civil and more specifically structural kind of came to be. Definitely wasn't easy. I mean, obviously, a lot of challenges. English not being my first language. I'm usually pretty introverted, going to a different culture. There was a lot of different things kind of going on. But I think at the end of the day, I was able to just recognize that there's a lot of challenges that are going to come my way, but it's just how I process that. One that comes to mind immediately is not really getting an internship until I graduated with my master's degree in engineering. So having to wait 6 years to really get an internship that I was passionate about was challenging. I was cleaning dorms, I was fixing furniture, I was doing all these random jobs just because I wasn't both an international student that couldn't get a regular internship just because of visa issues and all of these. But just taking those lessons and transferring them when I actually got the opportunity to work at a structural firm, I think that was very valuable. I think that that's something I still do to this day, just taking those little tidbits of lessons of those first few jobs and using them to my benefit at the end of the day, like putting them in my resume when applicable, doing all these things that I know are going to help me in the future. And then beyond that, just kind of trying to give back to the engineering community through, again, the podcast is kind of how it started almost 5 years ago, helping with organizations like the American Society of Civil Engineers, the Structural Engineering Institute of ASCE, different places where I'm able to give back the knowledge that I've been getting, both physically, like Engineers Without Borders, where I'm going to countries and actually doing some work, or just more intellectually, just talking with students, talking with engineers and seeing kind of what they're doing. So that's kind of a brief overview. I'm sure we'll dive deeper into some of these topics later on.
Yeah, what motivates you, do you think, internally to give back?
I don't know if there's anything specific, but just again, coming from a different country and just kind of seeing how challenging it was to get those opportunities. I think it's just more being grateful for what I've been able to accomplish and get, and just trying to give a little bit back from that. So I think that's kind of my main motivation in general. It's just more of kind of not keeping that knowledge to myself, because I know there's a lot of people that have helped me in the past, mentors, other engineers, family members, whatnot, and then just trying to, again, give back a little bit of that.
What was your thinking when it couldn't have been easy. We have a fair amount of foreign-born studied engineers at our level, and they're part of our strength is all the diversity, I think. But what was motivating you when you were like, I'm going to the United States? When I listened to the stories, they're actually just really, really, really a lot of will to do it, to actually accomplish it. What was part of that will for you?
I think just kind of getting new opportunities. I mean, coming from Colombia, again, there's some opportunities, but it's nothing like the US. There's a lot of big projects here, a lot of money moving around in engineering. And I think mainly just the fact that my parents were so supportive through the whole process, both emotionally, financially, physically coming here and helping and everything.
Yeah.
I think that was a big motivation of just, hey, I need to make these work. I need to find a solution. There's going to be a lot of challenges, but I need to figure it out.
Yeah, go do it. Yeah, cool. Well, you're here and doing well, and you're contributing and giving back, and awesome.
To say the least. Yeah, it's really cool to watch, or at least from my perspective. So I'm not an engineer. I do marketing and all sorts of things within our organization. And it's just cool to learn how impactful the work is. What does your day to day kind of look like? If you don't mind sharing a little bit into that. I think more recently you actually had a little bit of a title change or position change. But what is, as a bridge engineer, what is kind of your day to day or weekly schedule look like?
Yeah. So, like I said, there was a little bit of a career change, more than just a title change. I was doing kind of bridge demolition, construction engineering type of work before. Now I'm more on the like design of new bridges. So similar, but it is a lot of like day to day things that are not quite the same. I want to start a little bit of like before, just because I spent almost 5 years there and just kind of was more used to kind of the day to day. I'm just starting at this new position. But as an engineer, we do a lot more both communication, especially if you are later in your career. Maybe early on, you just kind of focus on numbers and that's kind of the main thing you do. But as you start progressing your career, there's going to be a lot more like client communications, communications within your team. You're maybe have a little more responsibility to have someone that you're overseeing. There's going to be a lot more kind of that more admin stuff in terms of the project, like the business side of engineering a little bit, especially or on a smaller company, which I used to be at. And with that, I think it comes the challenge of like, how do you manage now this extra work that is not really related to engineering? How do you incorporate it into like your day to day, and how you still produce good engineering work? 'Cause I mean, as an engineer, you still have to do the engineering. So for me, it was more, I'm gonna set aside maybe some time and figure out, hey, I was doing a lot of the business development, I was doing some of the marketing, I was doing kind of some other admin stuff around the office and whatnot. So I'm gonna take that time and set aside an hour or so a day, if possible, and then do the actual engineering afterwards. The engineering was challenging. There was not a lot of codes prescribing what we're doing. So a lot of like bridge demo or supporting structures in unique ways. So it was always just challenging to kind of come up with this idea and like, how do you make it work? Like, what code do you follow to design this thing? Do you follow Astro? Do you follow ACI or ASCE, ASCE, or like there's a lot of different codes that you could use. So I think the day to day was more kind of dependent on what was happening either during that week or what was the priority. But usually there was a lot of obviously engineering work. I was still an engineer. 80% of the time was spent in engineering. There was a little bit more of the admin stuff that was happening on the side. Right now, I'm just starting at Jacob, so it's kind of a new experience in terms of like, where do I fit in within the team? There's still a lot of engineering. There's a lot of things that need to happen. Obviously, I'm still trying to figure out kind of what that is right now. But at the end of the day, I think engineering is, there's a lot of numbers, but there's also a lot of communications. You need to write your calculations. You need to make sure you're doing all the business processes. If you have to submit all your information to the city for approvals or whatnot. So there's a lot of that. And I think we as an industry maybe miss it a little bit when we're teaching students, because I was like, I'm going to engineering. I love math. I don't like speech. I don't like writing. I don't like all these other things. But maybe half of the time, that's what I'm doing, even if it's related to engineering.
Right. Yeah, our academia is not necessarily serving us well, is it?
Yeah, it does seem like those are almost always necessary skills, the people skills, communication, admin, like those sorts of things. And I mean, you said it yourself, it's lacking somewhere along the journey, that there's some gaps there. And I would assume that's a big part of what led you to creating what you have now with the podcast and courses. And can you double click on that a little bit and tell us what that looks like? Like, what is your goal with it from a purpose side, but also, is it something that you're trying to grow into something bigger, or what does that look like?
It has changed a little bit over, I don't know, I started in 2020. So it has changed a little bit since I first started it. I definitely did not start it with the mindset of this is going to help me communication, writing, all of these stuff that I need for my job. I started more as a way to kind of share with other students, especially international students that have a lot of questions in terms of like, how do I get to the United States? How do I get my PE license if I didn't go to school in the US? And really, it started from a place of me having some of those questions when I came here as well. And now I'm getting them. I was part of the ASCE Collaborate Topic Moderator Group. So this platform that ASCE has where you can ask questions, you can basically find any answer that you have related to engineering. So that's really where it came from. I wasn't really thinking on, hey, I'm going to be improving my communication skills, I'm going to be improving my writing skills. But that has been probably one of the biggest benefits of all of this. Again, talking for an hour, sometimes by myself when I was starting on doing interviews, talking to owners of companies, CEOs of organizations, other engineers that are doing amazing work. That teaches you a ton of stuff. Even if I wasn't realizing it early on, I was again improving my communication skills, just losing the fear of talking to other people in general as an engineer. That's kind of important, especially if you work with a lot of clients, and especially if maybe those clients are a little on the quote unquote scarier side, they're not your friendliest client. You're developing those skills to manage those situations, stay calm, basically calm under stress. And I think that has been one of the biggest things. I wouldn't say I want to grow this to be its own company or anything. I may have had that mindset a few years ago, but it's too much for me to do this plus family, plus work, plus all of that. And I think at the end of the day, enjoy being an engineer a lot. So that's something I have always just kind of felt, even when I was doing really good with the podcast before I think I took like a 6 month break this year. And then I took like a 6 month break a couple years ago. I've always felt like engineering is just I love engineering. I just want to keep talking about it. But if I kind of step away too far, then I'm not going to be that tied into the engineering part of it. So I love Engineer Future, the podcast, the newsletter, all the things that I've been able to do has connected me with a lot of engineers. The best part of it is just going to conferences and meeting people that listen to the podcast and come to me and say, hey, thank you. I listened to this episode. It helped me get a job. It helped me find a new contact. It helped me whatever. That's the best part of it. And I enjoy doing that. And it's been amazing over the past, again, almost 5 years, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah. If you had to look forward, what do you think your career looks like for you? What's best for you, you think? Career path?
So, yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges in terms of like thinking, hey, what's next? And that's something that, especially now that I moved to this news company, the path is not as clear as I thought maybe a couple years ago. I think for me is kind of being an impactful engineer again within communities, within my community or communities that we work with. So I see myself as a hopefully project manager someday, kind of continue improving my skills. And more than just kind of being an engineer at a company, I want to be an engineer for life, for society, basically. So being part of like Engineers Without Borders or SEI and kind of being active in those organizations, I think it's super important. I think engineers kind of the path to be that kind of engineer in terms of like collaborating with other engineers, finding maybe solutions to bigger challenges and kind of being part of that conversation.
Great. Yeah, we got challenges coming, don't we? Yeah, for
Yes,
sure.
just a few.
Plenty of work to be done.
Well, plenty of work, but we're losing more engineers than we're gaining in the US, which is what we're working on. So there's less and less American engineers as every year goes by. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But the numbers that scare me are, 50 to 60% of American graduating engineers quit engineering altogether within 5 years. And what's your thoughts on that number?
Yeah, it's high. And I think that's, since I can remember being part of this organization, is a topic of a conversation. Like, how do we keep engineers engaged? How do we help students kind of understand the value of what they are in terms of their engineering profession? Like, are they just someone that just sits at a desk and crunches number all day and goes home and does nothing else? How do we make them understand that what they're doing may not seem impactful at the time, especially when you start on and you just kind of, hey, I got this beam to design, I just design and then move on to the next thing. Like, what are the impacts of that beam? Are they connecting communities? Are they helping maybe someone that didn't have water now reach water, especially in developing countries? What is the benefit of what they're doing? And I think that's hard to communicate at times, especially if you're maybe in a larger company and trying to just get your work done and move to the next thing. But that's why the work with these organizations is so powerful, because I am communicating with students all the time. I'm communicating with all engineers all the time in committees and meetings and everything. And It's just
Do they ever talk about why they're losing interest to you?
I think it's part of that is just that mindset of, hey, there's these other type of engineer that is more flashy. There's more outcome to it. When you talk about civil engineering, a lot of the things you don't hear about until something bad happens. So you're literally building the foundation for humanity in terms of like roads, water resources, bridges, buildings, and everything. But unless something bad happens, people don't really talk about it. And I think as engineers, especially as civil engineers, I think that may be a hard pill to swallow for a lot of younger engineers just looking for, hey, I want to be a rocket scientist. I want to go to Mars and just thinking about this bigger, I call them like more flashy, maybe engineering fields. And I think there is a lot of challenges that come to that with that in terms of like how do you recruit in the first place, but how do you keep them long term?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said. That's part of what we're up to with our podcast is just to say this is exciting stuff. This is exciting work. This is rewarding work. And it's not a boring career. It's a very, very nice career. Compensation is going down, and we're working on that. We've solved that. But wow, what a fun thing to do every day. And we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it enough to our society in general is civil, structural, engineering, architecture. This is exciting, fun work, and we're too silent to the point where we hurt ourselves. I don't know what it's like in Colombia when you grew up with your family, but here, if you go out on the street and you say, "What does a civil engineer do?" 90% of the time, they can't tell you the right answer.
Looking for a new opportunity? Interested in being part of an expanding network of independent engineers and architects who are thinking differently? Level Design Partners is on a mission to create prosperity for design professionals, the industry, and the world, using innovative business systems and a culture of collaboration. We believe that traditional education and firm structures want you to be a cog in their machine, depriving you of key skills needed to thrive, thus commoditizing an entire industry in the process. Gain access to skills, tools, and systems by partnering with Level Design Partners. Learn more at leveldesignpartners.com.
Yeah, and I think it's similar over there. It's challenging. It's challenging to describe it to someone, but at the same time, it shouldn't be just because basically everything you do have or anything else is probably there's a civil engineer behind it. I mean, driving a car on the road or even like the car itself has a probably a structural engineer that had to design some of that stuff. There is so much that civil engineers have design and touch and everything. There's sometimes challenging to like explain it to someone that may not understand it simply.
Yeah, we've got some fun things to talk about for sure. All right, so you're thinking that they're not feeling well. That's not a very exciting career. I never hear about all of us talking about going into civil engineering. Seems, I don't know, why would I do that? Seems boring. And then if they do get through it and they go into the workplace, they're like, okay, I guess I'm doing this. And then after a few years, like, forget it. I want to do something more exciting. Is it kind of what you're saying too?
Yeah, I think there's kind of at the 5 to 7 year mark is where a lot of people start dropping out. And I think it has to do a little bit with the pay. Like you said, it's not the highest pay, obviously, in the engineering industry as a whole. At the same time, again, there's a lot of learning that needs to happen before you kind of get to work in the more exciting projects. And that usually happens in the first 10 years of your career. You're probably not going to put into the most exciting bridge day one. You may work on little things here and there, but I think that takes a lot of time and experience to really being able to do something exciting in that magnitude. So I say it's kind of around that time. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons I encourage people to join engineering organizations. You get to see what's coming. You get to see the research of like what's coming in the future. You get to sometimes even be part of like some of the maybe bigger decisions. If I wanted, I could be volunteering in some of the code committees and kind of shaping that part of the industry, as well as there's initiatives like ASCE, I think like 2050, like future world cities. There's a lot of things that are happening that don't necessarily need to be technical and figuring out the numbers right now, but it's just opening the mind and exploring like what does the world look in 20 years, in 50 years? What are the cities going to be looking like? What is going to be our role as engineers? and how can we be part of that future?
Of course. You ever wonder if it's the structures we work within is the problem? Does your mind ever travel to that thinking?
I don't think so. What do you mean by these structures we work in?
So that's been my body of work, I think, Miles, for the last decade, is these struggles we're having as designers is actually the structures that we're working within is the cause of it. The systems we're working within is, and what they're up to isn't always a good fit for some of us. It's a good fit for a lot of us, but probably the majority, but not for all of us. And those systems of business is where I've been looking very closely at. Is this country was built on small, medium firms in their communities. And when the CAD came along, and CAD could actually, about 15 years ago, could get moved over the internet. The internet was powerful enough to carry the CAD data. That's when we're moving away from small, medium firms in our communities and mergers and buyouts and the monopolization of larger firms that are married to profit, stakeholder profits. And the overseas offices or Indian or other offices are paying engineers $3 an hour. Our wage as civil engineers in this country is in decline for the first time. So our wages in this country are in decline for the first time in the history of the US because of these structures that are happening. So it's curious. My mind's gone to that, is the lack of interest and the loss of the American designers got a lot to do with the structures that we currently are, what's available to us for a career.
Yeah, I think there's some challenges with that, and I think it's changed a lot since I graduated. Even, I mean, COVID kind of changed a lot of things. I work fully remote right now, and I've been doing this for at least 2 years, just working from home. I could have never imagined doing that when I graduated in 2016. Like,
Right.
I just figured out just be in an office, and that's kind of the path forward. So I think there's a lot of changes happening. We're still kind of trying to figure out how that really fits into what the industry is going to look like. There's a lot of people that are all for it. I mean, we can have these conversations over the internet really easily, do a lot of great collaboration. There's a lot of tools nowadays that allow that. There's a lot of companies that don't like that. They want to be everyone going to be in the office, and they like that face to face collaboration. So I think there's going to be a lot of changes. We're just kind of seeing the beginning of that. Like, what is that going to look like in 5 years? The demands from younger engineers and new generation of engineers is going to be different than my generation or like generations past. How are we going to adjust our mindset of collaboration? Like, what is that going to look like? So I think there's a lot of changes happening, and it's exciting to be part of kind of some of those solutions and like figuring out what's the best way forward is. At the same time, it's challenging because, again, you're talking about a huge industry that is going to definitely change a lot in the next few years.
Yeah, it's super interesting to me. I'm glad you spoke to it that way. Is this we're going to see a lot of change into how, and one of the largest topics you talked about earlier is how is the business of engineering and architecture going to serve basic human services well amongst all of the changes and challenges that's also moving very fast? And are these systems going to be ahead of it or reactive to it, or even possibly fail at serving it? With climate change, we've got so many challenges coming at us. The engineering communities and the structures they're in, are they going to? Is it going to be a miss? Is it going to adapt? Is it going to be turmoil? It's going to be a super interesting journey, I think, for your generations of engineers. That you're going to be in it pretty heavy, and leadership from your generation is going to be strong people, and what you're up to is going to be needed to be guiding, both the business structures, decisions, needs of the communities, and so successful on the other side. It's exciting to see you involved.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, even like the technology, like think about the last 10 years, the advancements in tools that we have. I mean, now with AI, there's a lot of things that are changing very quickly. And I think that's gonna be a big challenge also, just adapting to whatever it's coming. Because whether or not it's going to be the future. Like when you start engineering, probably you never thought like AutoCAD or any CAD software was going to be a thing of the future. Now I cannot imagine drawing a 100 to 200 drawing set by hand. So there's a lot of challenges coming, a lot of changes in technology in the industry in general. So I think it's just exciting to see kind of where that's headed. And obviously, as engineers, we need to stay on top of it.
Yeah, building efficiencies through AI. And it's actually it's a little interesting, I think, and from my perspective, is that's going to eliminate a lot of engineers' jobs for new work. But then we've got all this existing problems that are beyond their useful life. So we got the old structures, old buildings, old water mains, old roads, bridges. All of our older infrastructure is coming of age or beyond. So they've got to be worked on. So that's actually where I'm like, well, the new work's going to get less because of AI, but the old work's going to get larger because of the age. So it's going to be, and how we do that well. But
if I could ask just one last thing before we wrap around mentorship and collaboration, which are kind of the two big things that we've realized are the biggest mover. Because at the end of the day, you have to have people coming into the industry. You have to have people excited to, like you said, go through, school. It's grueling. Go through, 10 years before you can maybe get your hands on some like quote exciting projects. So to get through all that, you have to have the passion, you have to have the will, be curious. And I think a big player in that is not doing it alone, collaborating with others who are doing it alongside you in different ways, diversifying your network, your projects, all that stuff that you can. And then also mentorship is what I've seen from my perspective is just the most important. There's a wealth of knowledge and experience that is going to eventually fade away. And if we don't bridge, no pun intended, that gap, then we're going to have serious problems. So what role does mentorship play in your career? How important is it to bridging that gap?
I think it's maybe, I don't want to exaggerate, but maybe even the number one factor in like how we can help future generations. And a big part of, again, mentorship doesn't have to be, I'm going to be talking with this person one-to-one every week. We sit down for half an hour and talk. Mentorship could be, hey, I'm listening to these very interesting podcasts. Get a lot of information from these podcasts, these YouTuber, these engineer that posts a lot on LinkedIn. That to me is also part of that mentorship. Like the people you surround with and the people you kind of interact with can help you in your career find those challenges. Obviously, the formal mentorship is the most effective one because you can have your questions directly answered. You have a challenge, you can work through those. Informal mentorship, again, within your own company, or if you are part of engineering committees or engineering organizations, you work with a lot of people that are not maybe closer to your circle, but you still get that variety of information in terms of, hey, I have a challenge, could be engineering related, could just be, I have this situation at work. How do I even solve it? They're going to be able to help you a lot. And I think that's something that I've seen, especially as being part of the different committees at the national level. You get to interact with people with all sorts of different backgrounds. The structural engineering field may seem small, but once you get in it, there's a lot of different things that you do. Like you do bridges, you do buildings, you do construction, you do demo, you do all these different things that are structural engineering, but you are just a little piece in that big puzzle. So whenever you have a challenge, you can reach out to your network, and those are part of like your informal mentors, as well as just being able to help students and just being a mentor myself as well. Especially, I mean, even if I was a year or two out of school, I tried to be a resource for those that are one or two steps behind me. And that's been something that's been super rewarding. And I've heard a lot of great comments. And obviously, the people that are ahead of me and help me are like some of my best friends in engineering right now. We have grown more into just kind of more than just that professional mentorship. We kind of have these discussions. And when you're part of these committees, you kind of develop that relationship. So yeah, mentorship is just super, super important. And you don't have to have 10, 20, 50 years of experience to be a mentor. If you graduate from school, you could be a mentor to someone that is still in school. If you pass your PE, you can be a mentor to someone that's studying for the PE. Like there is a lot of mentorship in between. There's that big ladder that you start climbing, and you can help people behind you.
Yeah. The number 2 or 3 reason engineers are quitting is lack of mentorship, which is new to me. I mean, that 30, 40 years ago, that was ingrained in all of us, that we were all of us were mentoring all the time. So it's a new thing that we're not doing that. And that's the reason we're losing engineers. So whatever we can do to restore that, right, is really a problem to solve to keep our talent, is to be open to teaching and mentoring at all levels, like you said, even people that are in equal positions, mentoring each other, holding the space for each other to grow together, or bringing in people with different knowledge, and just being open to it and enjoying the mentoring. I don't know how we lost it. I really don't. I don't know how we got here, but it is one of the highest reasons we're losing our talent is lack of, I'm not learning my skill. I'm not learning my trade. Nobody's teaching me. Nobody's showing me how to work, communicate or negotiate or work with clients or work with government to get projects approved. All those things are missing, unfortunately. So
Yeah, and I find it so interesting because this day and age is the easiest way to find mentorship. I mean, you can just literally pick up the phone and call someone on the other side of the world and have them have a conversation with you. Yeah, I think I don't know exactly why. It's maybe a generational thing, but being able to find those mentors and again using the information that is out there to inform your own engineering knowledge, I think it's easier than ever.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I like that you said that mentorship doesn't necessarily only have to be like a one-on-one dynamic. I mean, it's true. This podcast in a way is aiming to be some mentorship, and what you're doing is mentorship. YouTube, books, conversations, tapping into the mind and experiences and stories digitally, even though it might be weird for some people. Or I think mentorship is changing and evolving into that. I think there's downsides of that and positives. And I think we have a lot of work to do to kind of bring back that one-on-one piece as much as we can, because I've seen it and it's just so impactful and powerful and sustainable. But it's a changing world. There's so many opportunities in this industry, and it's really exciting to see your part in it. And I really appreciate you coming on. We definitely should do this again, maybe 6 months, year down the road, see what's changed, check in on things, and would love to stay connected.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me. It was a lot of fun. I always enjoy having conversations like this.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you found value in this episode, support us by sharing it with someone or leaving a review. In upcoming episodes, we'll discuss the realities of the industry today and what the future may look like. It's our belief that positive changes for architects and engineers is not the obligation of the industry, but rather a choice you make to reimagine how we work together. We invite you to join us in creating a world in which design professionals thrive. Learn about our mission and get involved by following us wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribing to our newsletter at leveldesignpartners.com.